What do you think really is the cause of gun violence in this country? I mean, is it education? Is it the wrong people having guns? Is it too many guns? Is it not enough guns, as some people have said? Is it liberals? I mean, what is the problem?
No, I mean I think the problem is culture. What you see is a vast variety of differences, gun laws and gun effects. I mean, New Hampshire has virtually no gun laws. It has the lowest gun violence crime rate in the nation. Chicago obviously has tremendously heavy gun laws and has one of the highest gun violence rates in the nation. More people were killed in Chicago by handguns last year than were killed in Afghanistan among coalition troops last year. So, yeah, I think that the bottom line is this: it comes down to culture, and how do we inculcate a culture that really takes violence seriously and takes gun ownership seriously, and that may mean tailored solutions for different cultural backgrounds, but that seems to me the real root of the problem. Otherwise, we can pass as many gun laws as we want, but the truth is this: Britain has a lot of gun laws on the books. They have 5 times our violent crime rate. So if we really want to end not just gun violence, but violence, then that's going to take a shift in culture more generally.
Yeah, and part of what you're saying I completely agree with. I mean, if we look at Switzerland, I think Switzerland is a good example where we actually have government-provided guns with a lot of training for people who live in Switzerland. The guns are then kept in people's homes. There's tons of guns in Switzerland, but you don't actually have much gun crime at all. So I think the problem is I'm not actually against. Whether I'm for or against guns in the abstract, I think is less relevant. For whatever reason, Americans are committing violence with guns, and that's really, I think, the problem we have to focus on, right?
It's not all Americans. I mean, I think that we have to distinguish between groups. It's easy to say, all of America has a gun violence problem, but it's also not true, right? New Hampshire and Vermont do not have a gun violence problem. Chicago does have a gun violence problem. Washington, D.C. has a gun violence problem. Big cities that are heavily populated across the United States seem to have much more of a gun problem than more rural areas, even if the gun ownership rate is higher in the rural areas. So we have to be looking at solutions that will actually work. And the truth is that broadly tailored solution, I mean, it's possible there's a different solution for Chicago than there is for Montana. But I think that we have to be as careful and meticulous in crafting solutions as we can.
So my concern when you said that before was we may need to craft solutions that are tailored for each culture. It starts to border. That could be interpreted as saying it needs to be determined by race, potentially. I mean, along what lines? Explain more, because I don't want you to be accused of that if that's not what you mean.
Yeah, no, this has nothing to do with race. This has to do with profiling really young men between the ages of all races, between the ages of about 16 and 25. That most of the gun violence in this country is committed by young men aged 16 to 25. Men who come from predominantly single mother backgrounds, who have poor levels of education, who grew up in poverty. Those would be good weighing factors. And what we have to do is we have to create a culture with strong male role models, a culture where people have the opportunity to get out of poverty. And a culture, honestly, we need to jail more criminals. I mean, one of the biggest problems that we see is that if you keep criminals off the streets, they can't be out committing crimes. We see recidivism and criminals committing multiple crimes. So
okay, but let's stop there for a second, because I'm glad you're getting to the jail thing, because I think this is a big factor. Specifically, what types of criminals do you want to jail? Because I actually think that a lot of the problem, maybe you're talking about different criminals than I'm thinking of, but I think the drug war is a big factor here. I think the fact that we have this criminalization of even marijuana in many cases, which is creating dangerous situations. If we had marijuana, for example, which I don't smoke weed. This is not a personal thing for me, but I think that if we eliminated the entire culture that's surrounded by marijuana being something that's illegal, we would eliminate a ton of gun crime.
I think there may be truth to that. I'm actually very torn on the marijuana legislation because I don't think that it's been effective, and I don't think that it's effectively enforced. I do tend to think that the folks who are committing criminal acts will find another market, shall we say, with illegal substances that will allow them to engage their best their most marketable attributes, which in this case seems to be violence and illegal activity. I don't
that may
think
apply
that
to some, but the vast majority of people who at least are purchasing marijuana, maybe that applies to some of the dealers. But a lot of these gunfights that start from people buying drugs, that'll go away, I think.
Most of the I mean, a lot of those gunfights that are starting from buying drugs, those are by people who are in the trade. I mean, when you're talking about the normal marijuana user, which is really what you're talking about here, drug dealers are not folks who we need to find a way to let off the hook. I think that drug users may be. That's a whole different discussion. But
Well, essentially, we're talking about the government sanctioning and regulating those drug dealers, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, but the question is, what happens to the drug dealers?
Right, right.
Right. I don't think they're going to become pharmacists.
So let's go back to the thing, which is which criminals do you want to put in jails? Because I think jail population being completely blown up is part of the problem here.
Oh, see, I disagree. I think the easiest way to keep criminals from committing crimes is to not have them in the general population. So anybody who's convicted of a violent crime should be spending longer in prison, not less time. I mean, in the state of California, there was this crazy case that happened a few weeks back where a guy was let out of prison based on an old rape law.
We covered it, yeah.
His original sentence for rape was 3 years. I mean, that's insanity. Serving 3 years for a rape is craziness. So,
I agree with that. Okay.
The violent crime needs to be. We need more police forces. We need heavier police forces, and we need more police presence in downtrodden areas in order to really have a presence in crime heavy neighborhoods.